Alderman Byer.
Here.
Niles.
Here.
Holmberger.
Here.
Schrader.
Here.
Stallman.
Here.
Mackey.
Here.
Teeter.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Glad you came out tonight, and we'll have some interesting things to discuss. We do have public participation listed here as the next item, but I'm going to ask that first we go adjourn to the public hearing, and you hear the presentation from Town and Country Engineering, and I think you'll be able to frame your questions and comments a little better after that. So, at this point, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn to a public hearing to discuss and review the facilities planning document for the city's wastewater treatment facilities. Upgrades to these facilities are needed to comply with current and future Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources permit requirements, replace equipment that is nearing the end of its useful life, and provide treatment capacity to meet the needs, current and future needs. Do I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye as your name is called, please.
Alderman Niles.
Aye.
Holmberger.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Stallman.
Aye.
Mackey.
Aye.
Tully.
Aye.
Byer.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll call this public hearing to order and ask the city administrator to read the notice of public hearing that was published.
City of Jefferson public hearing notice regarding facility planning for wastewater treatment facilities. A public hearing will be held at 5 p.m. on the second day of December 2025 at the Jefferson City Hall Meeting Room, 317 South Main Street, Jefferson, Wisconsin 53549. The purpose of the hearing is to discuss and review the facilities planning document for the city's wastewater treatment facilities. Upgrades to these facilities are needed to comply with current and future Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources permit requirements, the replacement of equipment that is nearing the end of its useful life, and to provide treatment capacity to meet the city's current and future needs. The public hearing will discuss population and design projections, current and future permit requirements, alternatives evaluated, review of selected alternatives, implementation schedule, environmental effects, and impact on user charges. All interested parties are encouraged to attend or send their written comments in writing to the City of Jefferson at the address below. That again is 317 South Main Street. Comments will be accepted until December 9th, 2025. A copy of the facilities planning document will be available for review at Jefferson City Hall now through the duration of the comment period. If there are any questions, please contact Ben Heidemann, professional engineer, the city's consulting engineer, Town and Country Engineering Incorporated, at the following number, 608-273-3350. This notice was published in the 7 November and 25 November 2025 editions of the Jefferson Daily Union. And I think the only thing I would report to you, Mayor, and the council, neither the city clerk or I, at least to this point, have received any written comments.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. With that, we're happy to welcome and introduce Ben and Andrew from Town and Country Engineering, our contracted civil engineers.
Thanks, Mayor. Hi, everyone. So as the Mayor pointed out, I'm Ben Heidemann. I'm in Town and Country Engineering. I run our water and wastewater team at Town and Country. We've worked with the city for over 40 years on wastewater facilities here. I've been involved in the last few upgrades that occurred there. Just to get a couple bookwork things out of the way first, there is a sign-in sheet. Please, if you hadn't signed in when you came in, please do so. We want to make sure we document the folks that are here. There is also a copy of the executive summary of the report available for you guys to take with you, as well as a copy of the paper version of this presentation. As the public notice pointed out, we will be accepting comments, both verbal and written, through next week, Tuesday. Then following that period, those comments will be presented and the council will be discussing them tentatively on the 16th of December. Lastly, both Andrew and my cards are available back there. Feel free to take them. If you have follow-up questions, follow-up comments that don't get addressed tonight, or for whatever reason you want to talk through this, feel free to get a hold of either one of us. We can talk through anything associated with this plan at your leisure. All right, can you hit the next slide, Todd? So just big picture, I'm going to talk for probably about a half hour here and try and do my best to summarize the planning report. So we'll go through what is facility planning in general, what and where is the treatment facility today, what and why are we even talking about this, what options does the city have, how much will it cost, how does that affect the residents here in Jefferson, and then after that, I think we'll transition back to the next agenda item, which will be public comment, and we can talk about that a little more. So, facility planning, you'll hear me say a lot. For the purposes of wastewater, it's a pretty special word. It is a regulatorily required document that municipalities have to do in advance of any work on their facilities that affect the quantity or quality of how the wastewater is treated. So everything we're talking about today is focused on wastewater. Within that document, the code and the regulations that exist do require that planning period be for 20 years. So the plan is built around a 20-year look into the future at what the city of Jefferson needs and what we should be planning for. These planning documents can take all sorts of shapes and forms, but big picture, they should evaluate what is the status of the current infrastructure, what do we need to plan for from a population standpoint, from a industrial standpoint, from a future maintenance standpoint, from a future regulation standpoint. What are the things we need to be worried about for the city of Jefferson relative to wastewater treatment? Then, based on what kind of those problem statements get created from, we look at different options for how that looks, and then do a life cycle analysis on what is the best option here. All of those steps occur over the course of a period of time and get discussed at the governing body level. For Jefferson's planning efforts specifically, this has been about a 3.5-year process. We started this in the winter of 2021, so we'll do our best in the next 30 minutes to kind of summarize all of those discussions that have happened and the evaluations that have happened, because a lot of things have changed over that time period. Move on to the next one, Todd. I'm going to just hit on some big picture things here that'll be a common theme throughout the presentation, and if you've read the report, through the report. Wastewater treatment facility summarized very often as WWTF. You might also hear me slip up and say WWTP, that's wastewater treatment plant. Synonymous, they're the same thing. Lift stations are generally how wastewater gets conveyed to a treatment plant. So a lift station, in general, when you flush the toilet, it goes out to the street. You have a sanitary sewer in front of your house. That is a sloped pipe that allows all of the wastewater to flow by gravity. If it gets to a spot where it's too deep to be reasonably constructed, a lift station gets constructed. Where pumps are located there, it gets pumped up the hill, and then it starts flowing down the hill again until it eventually reaches the treatment plant. So the city of Jefferson has 7 lift stations. In addition, there are 3 lift stations at the wastewater treatment plant. So there's 7 out in the system at low spots that need to go up over a hill, and then there is 3 of them at the treatment plant itself. We're going to talk a lot about the things that are in the wastewater. So the design loadings area there, we're going to treat a certain number of gallons of wastewater. That's the flow we're talking about. And then those next 4 items are the biggest constituents that we worry about from a treatment standpoint. Biochemical oxygen demand, it's summarized as BOD. You can assume that that's organics in the wastewater. Any organic molecule and ultimately those things, in order for us to degrade those, consume oxygen. That's why we call it biochemical oxygen. Total suspended solids, TSS, that's another, a little more self-explanatory. That's particles in the wastewater. Sand can be total suspended solids, silts, anything like that. Any particle in wastewater that you can see or not see, but filter out, is called total suspended solids. Total colloidal nitrogen, or TKN, that's the total nitrogen. So it's the nutrient nitrogen, same thing you put on a farm field. And then total phosphorus, the same thing you put on a farm field. Those are the two nutrients that we mostly worry about at a treatment facility. And then the last, just general term, is WPDES permit, Wisconsin Pollution Discharge Elimination System. So that is a permit that is issued by the DNR. The Wisconsin DNR is the regulatory agency in charge of wastewater that says, City of Jefferson, you are allowed to put this in the wastewater, or out into the Rock River. So we discharge to the Rock River, and the DNR tells us what we are allowed to discharge and how much treatment we are required to do. So the treatment plant is located on the southeast side of the city, immediately along the Rock River, off of Tensfeld Park. And if you go to the next slide, Todd, this is an aerial view of the treatment facility. I'm realizing that I did not bring a pointer. Can you use your mouse and hover over? What do you want? We're just going to walk our way through the treatment plant. So big picture, what happens is in the upper left corner, I can't see it. Thank you, Evan. That's where the wastewater comes in. We're going to make this a team effort. That's a pumping station. So all of the wastewater comes in about 25 feet below grade. There's one big pipe that comes along Riverside Drive and one big pipe that crosses the river almost perpendicular at that spot. They treat about 1.5 million gallons of wastewater per day, contributed by the City of Jefferson as a whole. From there, it gets pumped up to a building immediately adjacent to it called a headworks. That building removes anything that's not biodegradable. So rags, trash, debris, sand, all get removed in that building called a headworks. From there, it flows by gravity down to the rectangular tanks in the middle of the plant, and that circular tank that Andrew just pointed at. Those are called primary clarifiers. That is what predominantly removes those total suspended solids that we were talking about. So they're just big tanks that allow anything that weighs more than water to settle out to the bottom of those tanks. There's mechanical scraping mechanisms that scrapes that. We call it sludge at that point. It's really glamorous. To a single spot, and then that has now been removed from the wastewater. Then it flows to that large rectangular structure there. There's a pumping station at the bottom of that. It pumps it to the top, and it then flows down through that into the square tanks. Those, basically that whole structure is a farm. We're growing microorganisms there that consume the remaining pollutants that are in the wastewater, specifically the BOD and the TKN, the nitrogen. So if you've driven by the treatment plant, that's the really tall thing that you see. Maybe not apparent here, but the tallest point in the treatment plant is what Andrew's pointing at right there. So we grow a bunch of bugs in there, and those bugs eat the bad stuff, basically. Those bugs then flow to other circular tanks. Those are called final clarifiers. But those kind of do the same thing that those primaries do. They're big tanks that create a really calm environment, and we get all of those bugs to settle to the bottom of the tanks. Those bugs are then recirculated back into the large tank where they eat more wastewater, and they just go through that in an infinite loop, which is why I call it a wastewater farm. But basically, we get to a point where we have too many bugs. We have to get rid of them. So we waste a certain amount of bugs every day. That gets combined with that primary sludge that makes up the biosolids that we treat. From the final clarifiers, I'm going to stick with the liquid treatment, we go through a UV disinfection system. So it's a bunch of lamps that are down in the wastewater, look just like a fluorescent bulb, that emit UV light that kill all of the remaining pathogens at that point. and then it flows out of the treatment plant by gravity. During a flood, there is a pump station. So normally when the river is below a certain level, it's all just flowing by gravity out of the plant. If the river stage reaches a certain level, pumps turn on and it starts pumping the wastewater back to the river. We do, in between there, also feed a chemical to remove phosphorus. That's how we clean wastewater today. That's the liquids treatment at the treatment facility. The sludge that we generate also needs to be treated. So that ends up getting pumped to the 3 circular tanks on the northwest side there. Those are anaerobic digesters. So we heat the sludge up to 98 degrees Fahrenheit. We hold it in there for about 20 days. More bacterial consumption happens, and it's basically a cannibalistic environment where all of the bugs eat each other. They produce methane gas, which we burn, and then after it leaves that 20 days later, that sludge has been stabilized and is suitable for use on farm fields. We then pump it from there into a large tank that's just off the picture here, but if you drive by the treatment plant, it's the most prominent thing you'll see. It's about a 1 million gallon white tank with a big aluminum dome on it. That is where we store the biosolids so that we can then land apply it on farm fields either before crops get planted in the spring or after crops get harvested in the fall. Let's move on to the next one, Todd. Oh, one thing I do, and then we'll get to it right here, want to mention is this treatment plant site has been in use since the early 1900s. If you look at some old maps of the city of Jefferson, the collection system has gone to this point for about 100 years, where there used to be a wastewater pumping station. So way back in the day, all that happened is everything flowed to that spot, and it got pumped to the river. And then some of this dates, none of what we see today dates back to the early 1900s, but much of it does go back to the 50s. And there's been a variety of upgrades that have occurred over the years. So why did this whole process start? Why did we even start planning? Well, the big reasons were the last time anything had been touched at the treatment plant was the early 2000s, save for some of the work that had been done associated with the flooding. So it was at a point in the community where we needed to consider the age of some of the equipment that was there, what was happening to permit requirements. So the permit that we get from DNR regulations have changed over the last 40 years, and that needed to be addressed. We needed to look at the capacity of the treatment facility and then make sure that we're addressing flooding concerns in the longer term. In order to do all of that, obviously funding's a thing, we'll get to funding in a little bit, but the first step in all of those processes is this planning effort. So it's kind of step one of a 3-step process. So from an age and a condition standpoint, the stuff that's circled here, those are the structures that date back to the 50s or before. I won't go into a lot of detail on them, but most of that is still in use and is still very critical to the operation of the treatment plant today. If you go to the next slide, Todd, then there was a large upgrade in the early 80s when much of the existing facility was constructed, and much of what you see today is from the early 80s. And then more recently, there was a smaller upgrade in the early 2000s that added headworks facilities and some sludge thickening facilities, but really didn't appreciably touch anything from the 80s. So just from an overall need standpoint, a lot of what triggered this initial study was much of the facility dates back to the early 80s, and so it's over 40 years old at this point. Another big trigger was some of the permit requirements. Again, as I mentioned, DNR issues a permit to the Jefferson Wastewater Treatment Facility. Within that permit, the 2 big things that created some concern for us was phosphorus. So in 2010, Wisconsin adopted some new phosphorus regulations. So the plant, as it exists today, treats phosphorus down to what is considered traditional phosphorus treatment levels, roughly 1 part per million. The new regulations that were passed for the entire state of Wisconsin in 2010 would reduce that to 0.075 to 0.1 parts per million, so about a 10x reduction. In 2011, a further study was done specific to the Rock River Basin, starting at the border at Wisconsin, working its way all the way up to the top of the basin. And it was a thing called a TMDL, or a total maximum daily load. And it was basically a more precise study of the Rock River Basin that said, okay, City of Jefferson, you can discharge this much phosphorus. City of Fort Atkinson, you can discharge that much phosphorus. City of Whitewater, and everybody, including agriculture and private industry, here's how much phosphorus you can discharge. And what that, there's a lot of nuance to it, but basically the city has grown to the point where they are no longer able to reliably meet those limits for the long term because of that growth. It just keeps ratcheting the amount of phosphorus we have to remove down, which is going to trigger the need for additional things at the end of the treatment plant to add treatment for phosphorus. The other big challenge regulatorily is we are regulated on our biosolids. The sludge that we generate and store in that 1 million gallon storage tank has to meet certain requirements. That gets monitored just like what the water we discharge back to the Rock River is. Within that program, we produce a Class B sludge, which means it has not been treated to a level that you could use on your garden or on your yard, but it is treated to the level that you could use it on field corn or soybeans or non-food crop crops. In the area, or for Class B sludge, we do need to get fields approved for that. They have to meet certain requirements, certain depth to groundwater, certain depth to bedrock, certain separation distances from rivers and streams and waterways, and houses and private wells. So the city has a very successful biosolids land application program, but has historically had lost, either due to recertification by DNR and changing wet conditions, or things like the solar farms that are in the area, lost about 700 acres of approved farm fields, and is down to about 300 acres of approved farm fields, which they are using about 170 to 180 acres per year at current levels. So it's created some restrictions on where and how often we can apply for those biosolids. On to the next one. Next one shouldn't be a surprise for those that have lived in Jefferson for a while, but every now and then we have some flooding. And specifically, the treatment plant is located in the floodplain. So this map that's shown right here, Andrew, can you point at just the general area of the treatment plant, is within the floodplain. We'll show some pictures if you want to go next, Todd. And in 2008, it did flood. Thankfully, the treatment plant itself was able to be maintained, but you can see floodwaters surrounding the treatment plant. If you go to the next picture, you can see that sandbagging had to occur. There was work done after this to improve the berm. There's a berm that surrounds the entire treatment plant. But from a regulatory standpoint, we are also required to have dry land access during a 100-year flood. This does not have dry land access. So that's another one of the challenges that needs to be addressed in the long term with the facilities. And DNR would make happen with any major improvements to the facility. On to the next one, Todd. So that kind of walked through all of the problems that we had to look at and talk about and think about, as well as then just what do we need the treatment plant to do? What do we need it to be in the future? What does the city of Jefferson want to be when it grows up, type thing. So this, I'm not going to go through the details of this table. If you really want to understand how it got generated, that the report can walk you through that. But big picture, as we look at this here, this is kind of how we plan for the future. So this table, along with it, shows a quite lengthy exercise where we considered, how much population do we need to plan for the city of Jefferson. You'll see on there, basically it's flat line. DOA projects that the city of Jefferson's not going to grow. There's some disagreement with that on the city council level, so we had to work our way through that because regulatorily we're required to use DOA's population projections for the city. We also need to look at comprehensive plan. What is the overall growth plan for the area around Jefferson? So this is meant to match with that, as well as local industry. How much capacity does local industry need? So that, within all of that, we look at that column that says current conditions. That's how much is currently going to the treatment plants. And we look at a variety of statistics, like on an annual average basis, or a maximum month basis, or a maximum day basis, or like during that flood, how much water are we having to treat? Because the treatment plant is expected that when a drop of water gets to it, it gets through the treatment plant and gets treated to those same standards. There's no, I get a pass day for, I had a flood. That is a day that you have to test your effluent and make sure that it is meeting those requirements. And then we need to make sure it's large enough to accommodate what you need today and what you need for the future. So big picture, this is structured around the 2045 design capacity. And the combination of population and commercial growth and industrial growth and a contingency factor all go together in terms of declaring this is how big of a facility we need to think about. So as we look at that, we kind of hit on some of the big picture things to be concerned about. From a filtration standpoint, that would be how we treat that phosphorus down to those further levels that we talked about earlier. That's something that's needed today. We're at a point where the city of Jefferson has grown to the point where the current treatment system can't keep up. We need to add a secondary treatment system, a tertiary treatment system actually, to increase the amount of phosphorus removal that we have. Put it again. We also today have sludge management issues. By code, we're required to have 180 days of sludge storage. But I don't think we've hit 180 days in a long time. Thankfully, most years, things time out just perfectly that we don't actually need to wait 180 days between the last time we can apply sludge in the fall and the first time we can apply sludge in the spring. This winter could be interesting actually, since we had snow in late November, because we are not allowed to apply snow on frozen or snow-covered ground. And similarly, farmers won't let us apply sludge when crops are planted because they don't want damage to their crops, obviously. So we have sludge management issues today, and then as we grow, do it one more time, Todd, we'll start to approach the reasonable capacity of the existing facilities. On to the next one. So what affects the cost? Because we'll talk about the costs, and many of you have probably seen those already in the report itself. And this is something that's been a challenge for me working in this industry for about the last 4 years now, where I haven't worked in the industry for 4 years, but cost has been a bigger issue in the last 4 years. So things that affect the cost of the treatment plants, obviously economies of scale. The bigger the thing is, the lower you pay per thing. It's the same thing as if you were doing a house renovation project. If you're going to build a house, dollars per square foot go down the bigger you make that house. Parallel to that, though, inflation has become a huge thing in our industry, and that kind of pairs with contractor availability. So when we do the cost projections that we'll talk about in a little bit, those are based on, we maintain a kind of a database of how much does it cost to build a certain thing at a treatment plant. And treatment facilities in general, they fall under a category of what's called industrial construction. And further fall under that category is it's a small subset of industrial construction. So we only end up seeing 2 to 4 general contractors that actually bid the work in the wastewater industry, in addition to Whitewater then being in Walworth County, asking if anyone was interested in some sort of a cooperative project. So looking at building a treatment plant together, can we build off of those economies of scale and benefit both of our communities? And that conversation did go somewhere with both Whitewater, Fort Atkinson, and Lake Mills. For Whitewater and Fort Atkinson, that was looking at consolidated sludge treatment. And for Lake Mills, it would be consolidated everything, where Lake Mills would consider pumping to Jefferson, building a bigger treatment facility in Jefferson. Ultimately, what came out of that evaluation was none of those other communities were either at a point in their treatment plant life or at a point where they financially wanted to invest to join with Jefferson. For specifically Whitewater and Fort Atkinson, it was, they didn't have a driving need to spend the additional money to get it to Jefferson. For Lake Mills, they ended up deciding to slice their project up and do it over the course of the next 30 years, as opposed to pumping it the extra 10 miles to get to Jefferson. Todd, from a liquids treatment process standpoint then, we did look at what would we need to do in order to maintain the existing liquids treatment. So if you go to that, Todd, we kind of talked about this already, but basically, how can we make the existing treatment facility process work with the future needs of the facility, as well as then, hit the next slide, we looked at 3 different liquids treatment alternatives. One of them was an oxidation ditch. If anyone's interested, I would spend hours and upon hours talking with you about the different technological differences. I'm going to glaze over them tonight. So we looked at oxidation ditch, a newer technology called granular sludge, or something called conventional activated sludge. The 2 on the outside, I would say 75+% of municipalities in Wisconsin have one of those, 2 of those. That center one is a newer technology that is meant to fit into a smaller footprint. So we looked at different varieties and different sizes of each of these and prepared cost evaluations as to how those different components would both cost effectively treat the wastewater as well as provide you some non-quantifiable flexibility in the future. What minimizes your risk in the long run, as well as for both treatment reliability, expandability, replaceability, and future regulations. So all of that kind of went together to in an attempt to look at what is the best solution, not just the lowest cost solution. On to the next one. Similarly for biosolids, we looked at it in the same fashion, but that added a whole nother layer of Class A versus Class B biosolids. So as I mentioned, Class B, that's what we produce today. We produce a liquid Class B, so it's roughly the consistency of a milkshake is the final product. And it has been treated to a level that is allowed. I use lots of food analogies, so I'm sorry if that, you don't like that. But it has been treated to allow it to be applied on non-food producing agricultural fields. Alternatively, you can do what's called Class A treatment, which goes through additional steps to make it more widely distributable. So if you're familiar with something like Milorganite, Milorganite is sewage sludge from the city of Milwaukee that has been treated to Class A standards and then made available for public use as a because all biosolids have high levels of nutrients of both nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium. So we did look at a couple different options for Class A treatment. Because if you remember, one of our big concerns is just the ability to store and land apply those biosolids. We've been having a lot of fields losing approval or purchased or sold or not available to us anymore. And looking at Class A would create some options for that. Looked at 3 different technologies of Class A. Ultimately, all of these look at some method of elevating the temperature of those biosolids to further kill pathogens. So all 3 of those technologies would result in something that, you could bring your truck over to the treatment plant, fill it up, put it on your garden, and have the world's greatest tomatoes you'll ever see. Go on to the next one. Conversely, looking at different options for Class B treatment, some of them the same as today, some of them different from today. Go on. And then the last thing we looked at is where is this going to go? We exist on a fairly limited site. And so the question was asked, like, where should we build it somewhere else? Should we build it where we are today? And ultimately looked at both options for fitting it within the existing footprint of the existing treatment facility, fitting it within an expanded footprint of the existing facility, which would include eliminating public works as well as expanding into Tensfeld Park, and compared that to a site to be named, and did a bit of a mapping exercise as to where could we go if we wanted to. And ultimately, citing a new treatment plant, you end up with a lot of requirements. There are specific offset requirements that are required by code for houses and wells and wetlands and kind of the same stuff we talked about earlier that affect biosolids. You also have to pump it there. Because right now you have the blessing of everything flows by gravity, or most everything flows by gravity to the existing site. You can't find another site like that because you want to get it out of town when you move your treatment facility. And then there's just some operational characteristics. Ideally, once you pump it to a new site, you want it to flow by gravity. So we look for sites with a certain amount of slope across them. Ideally, you're not stuck in situations 100 years from now where you have no room to grow or no room to replace assets. And so that was a big factor in how we looked at sites. So ideally, you would be looking at 20 to 40 acres or more available for a treatment facility. Go on to the next one, Todd. So all of those, and there were many, many different matrices of how we got to this point, but we looked at it from a capital cost standpoint, we looked at it from an operating cost standpoint. We combined those components together to do what's called a net present worth or net present value analysis. And basically that allowed us to present information to the city council of, here's an option that maybe is a little bit higher capital cost, but lower on operating costs over a 20-year or 40-year basis, which one comes out more cost effective. Similarly, we looked at what things affect the decision-making process that can't be quantified in dollars. Whether that's ease of operations, resiliency for either flooding or shock loads or what have you, what gives you the most flexibility for future regulatory requirements, because the regulations don't ever get easier. They always become more stringent, and nobody has a crystal ball for the next 100 years. And you're going to be having to be treating wastewater in the city of Jefferson for as long as the city of Jefferson exists. So all of that was a part of the discussions that were had leading up to this point. Ultimately, we'll start going through some of the numbers. The big picture capital costs, and these are just summaries, if we reuse the existing treatment facility processes, looking at about $168 million upgrade versus if we construct new processes, $155 million. And you can see the present worth differences there. A lot of the differences in cost there are the staging and the working around existing things, because there's also no such thing as I'm going to turn my treatment plant off for 3 years while I build new stuff. So what would typically take 3 years to build today would probably take 4 or 5, because we can only build certain components at a time, and we're kind of working our way through the treatment facility to do that. So in a lot of the long-term, reliability, regulatory framework things that went into a scoring mechanism for that non-monetary, the new process had better results. And then looking at Class A versus Class B sludge, similarly, Class A is more expensive. You have to go through additional treatment steps. It is going to cost more, but then in comparison to adding some cost to the long-term impacts of land application, you can see those, the net present value, the long-term cost tightened up. It didn't eliminate the additional cost, but it tightened that up. But then with Class A, you also have more ability to future-proof and avoid regulatory concerns. You're also, in what we'll show as the selected alternative, significantly reducing the volume. So right now, the sludge that you produce, again, it's milkshake consistency. It's about 97% water, 98% water. There are mechanisms to remove that water. So we can get it to be a clay, cakey consistency just through mechanical means. But that doesn't produce Class A, so that just makes it so that it's a wet dirt consistency, and it'll still be about 80% water. Or we can run it through a dryer, which then evaporates the remaining water, gets it to about 10% water, but then also heats it up enough to kill the pathogens and produce a Class A product. So that's kind of the differences between that Class A and Class B consideration is we're looking at doing that drying step. So it also has benefits of you've now had about a 25x reduction in volume in what you have to haul out to some other site in the future. On Todd?
I'm sorry, what does NPV stand for?
Net present value. So that's the cost effectiveness number. So from that, the ultimate recommendation was constructing an oxidation ditch, so a new liquid process along with Class A dry sludge at the existing site. That came after considerations of new versus old and all of the things we just talked about. Go on to the next one. So the major factors in looking at that is with the new process, not only did it create some of the future flexibility and the lasting solution that the city was looking for, but also was a lower cost solution. The oxidation ditch was selected because it was a more proven technology than the center one that I was talking about, and it also creates some flexibilities for the sludge, because it'll actually produce a Class B sludge coming out of the oxidation ditch as opposed to conventional activated sludge that has to go through another step to treat it, as well as future-proofs some anticipated regulatory changes that are going to be coming over the next 10 years, we anticipate. And it's also a very simple and robust system to operate. Again, we talked about Class A sludge. That combines both the challenges that have been experienced for the existing sludge processing system, as well as, again, in that theme of future-proofing, creates the lowest end product volume. So some folks may have heard of PFAS. We don't have PFAS in our biosolids. We have no PFAS issues at the treatment facility. But that's just one example of 7 years ago, we had no idea PFAS was a thing. And literally, the testing just didn't give you the option to consider that. So it's creating a situation that if you ever have the next new thing come up, always have the flexibility to handle this, and you end up having the lowest volume produce potential there. So it creates some future risk mitigation for the city as well. From the existing site standpoint, we are looking at expanding the treatment facility footprint at the existing site. And a lot of the factors that came into play there, I think I'm going to mention in another slide, but ultimately it came down to it's a lower cost option. The city is looking to, within this evaluation, replace both Public Works and Tensfeld. So that is part of the cost evaluation that's there. So Tensfeld Park, while it will be renovated to be treatment facility space, is going to be replaced in another location in the city. Same thing with Public Works. So what ended up being the ultimate benefit for the city is it's a lower cost, between about $15 million, and does create kind of all of those check boxes that we were very worried about. I didn't mention a ton earlier, but a lot of the discussions that we had at city council meetings and with staff were, how do we not shoot ourselves in the foot where 10 or 20 years from now we're back at the same problem. Spending a lot of money on existing facilities, and then we still have challenges down the road how do we future-proof this? So that was a lot of the concepts of both expanding the existing site and new site is not only do we need to worry about what do we have today and ignoring growth, how do we maintain this future? How do we make sure that this site continues to serve us for the next 100 years? And a lot of the concern that was expressed if we stayed within the existing footprint is we're going to spend a lot of money on the existing facilities, no matter what. And, 20, 30, 40 years from now, have additional challenges in trying to update and maintain, because structures don't last forever. So this site concept or site indication shows 3 or 4 shaded areas. There's also a 5th one that's off the screen, but area 1 is that Tensfeld Park Public Works area. That is what has been proposed to include expanded treatment structures. The area 3 of the site is where existing treatment structures are that we're going to be repurposing. Area 4 predominantly covers area that we're going to be getting rid of those treatment structures, so most of those are circa 1950s. And then there'll be some new structure constructed there. Area 5 is immediately off to the bottom right. That's that existing pumping station. We're going to be repurposing the existing pumping station. And then the one I skipped, area 2, is going to be administration facilities. So we're going to be relocating administration facilities over to that area that's closest to the public, so that won't have treatment structures associated with it. Beyond all of that, we are going to be elevating all the structures and raising and basically making a peninsula there to get everything out of the floodplain. So that is a big factor here. So there will be dry land access. Everything will be above the floodplain without sandbagging, without berming in the future. So probably the biggest thing that all of you are asking is, what is the impact here? And really what we're going to try and summarize for the balance of my presentation, and I'll try and keep it moving because I realize that I'm talking a lot. User rates, construction impact, and what happens after construction's done. Go on, Todd. From a user rate standpoint, funding is the name of the game. These projects don't happen without some level of state or federal funding. Difficultly, we're in a period of a funding lull nationally. So USDA Rural Development is a very common program for small to medium-sized communities, providing funding to water and wastewater projects like this. The photo that's shown is actually their neighbor, Sullivan. They got a 45% grant from USDA. Unfortunately, under the current federal government, that program has been significantly reduced in terms of funding availability, and interest rates are quite high. So that is not likely to be an option, but we kind of continually over the progress of this look at what are the best funding options available. There's the Clean Water Fund program. That's a state program through the Wisconsin DNR. That is currently the best funding program that exists for facility projects like this. It includes principal forgiveness, which is grant money. It does offer a 30-year loan, and it subsidizes the interest rate 45%. So that creates a pretty competitive interest rate. Today it's 2.7%, I believe. On top of that, there's some more minor funding programs for projects like this. EDA is the Development Authority, thank you. So they provide up to $3 million grants for projects that generate job creation, which wastewater facilities fall within. Focus on Energy is a smaller program, but awards communities for energy efficiency projects. And then a newer one on the scene, but certainly becoming a bigger factor, is congressionally delegated spending. So that is quite literally the city petitions their local governing officials for the federal government, senators and representatives, and pursues earmark dollars for their projects. And that has become a very common thing, and Jefferson has benefited from that on certain projects over the last couple of years, and would certainly be something that we'll be looking at for this types of a project. Go on to the next one, Todd. So then what the overall impact for an average residential user is summarized here. So currently, you're paying, an average user is paying around $30 per month. Anticipated future user cost is somewhere between 75 and 90. It's listed as a range because we don't know what the final funding will look like. That range impacts the funding, as well as who is in town impacts the funding. We're going to go to the next one, Todd. So one of the big things that goes into the user rate analysis is the wet industries that exist in Jefferson. You guys are blessed with having quite a few and a growing number of industrial contributors. They have a big impact on your treatment plant, both in that they make your treatment plant bigger, but they're also offsetting a disproportionate share of the cost. So the facility does need to grow, and a portion of that growth is necessary because of those industries. However, if you were not to have any of the local industries or any new industries coming to the community, you would still be looking at over $100 million investment that was estimated, and the associated rate impact would be higher. Comparatively, which is something we always want to look at, nearby communities are in that $35 to $95 per month range. That's specific to the local area. One thing I've advised a lot of my clients is, you know, the inflationary factors and the funding factors that we've talked about tonight are certainly a newer phenomenon. So in all cases, when a community invests in their infrastructure, they tend to have their rates climb towards the high end of those in the state. The communities that are lucky enough to be the first ones after some of this inflationary impacts and funding impacts are seeing that number be higher. And over time, other communities will by necessity be up in that range because everyone is needing to maintain their treatment facilities on somewhere between a 25 and 40-year basis. On Todd, from a nearby residence impact, certainly there's going to be a lot going on for approximately a 3-year period of construction. So you'll see an increase in construction traffic. But then following construction, we anticipate it's going to be very run-of-the-mill of the treatment facility. You know, couple workers running the entire treatment facility, but then a reduction of local traffic on weekends because that park will no longer be serving a weekend issue. We do recognize that we are moving closer to adjacent residents by doing this, so the odor and view will be a top priority for anything that occurs down there. There'll be odor mitigation measures, as well as, to the greatest extent possible, screening included along Tensfeld there to reduce the visual impact of any of the new structures. Big picture timeline, as I indicated, we've been talking about this. We're going on 4 years now. We're in 2025. We're reaching the last steps of this planning phase. I also mentioned this is a kind of a 3-step process, so we'll be moving from planning, which will be submitted in early 26, pending discussions by the City Council, into design. Design will take about 2 years with the goal then of bidding a project in the spring of 2028, and then anticipated construction is about 3 years for a project this scale. I believe that closes out my presentation. And I apologize, but it took more time than I was expecting.
No, thank you, Ben. That's very comprehensive. Given the nature of tonight's agenda, we do have this set up as a public hearing, and so at this time, I will invite any persons wishing to be heard to please state your name, address, and reason for appearing. We will take both comments and questions as time allows. We have a half an hour, so if we, looking around the room here, if we could stick to our standard 3 minutes for questions or comments. We'd appreciate that so everybody gets a chance to speak. So with that, we'll take anyone who would like to offer comments or questions. It would be very helpful if you are able to stand. We're not going to ask you to come up to the podium here, but if you could please stand where you're located, that would be helpful so everyone can hear you. And I'll just ask you to raise your hands and I'll call on you as, yes, sir.
My name's Pat Rice. I live at 334 East Dodge Street, and I would like to come to the podium so I can set myself down.
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks. I'll try to do all this in 3 minutes, but you went over, so I might too. All right. So first, I want to commend Town and Country for the preliminary report. I think I've read through both the 143 pages that are on the city's website, as well as Appendix Q. And it's pretty comprehensive. It leaves little doubt, I think, that Jefferson's wastewater treatment facility needs to be replaced. But the report does raise some concerns, specifically regarding the cost and some significant unknowns. First of all, the listing price tag, as you just showed, is $155 million, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And that's in today's dollars, not 2 years from now. That doesn't consider what inflation might do 2 years from now. Okay, so inflation would be a concern when it comes to the price. But missing from the report, the 143 pages on the city's website right now, really is the financing cost for the project. The $155 million doesn't bake in the financing cost.
It does.
It
No,
does.
well, the 155 million does not include the financing cost. The user rate analysis that
Right.
is in Appendix Q does consider the financing cost.
Correct, Appendix Q.
Yes.
So I looked at Appendix Q, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears to me that once you bake in those costs using the state program, which was what was recommended, that it then goes up to somewhere north of $200 million. Is that correct, about 209 million?
I would expect, that seems like a reasonable ratio.
I think that might be misconstrued in the NPV versus the financial cost. That shouldn't be.
Appendix Q is finance though. Yeah,
We can certainly
we
follow.
can follow up on
Yeah, I
that.
think you should, because it looks like it's over $200 million. And I think that as you talk about this, I know when people buy a house, they say, well, here's what I paid for it, but they don't tell everybody, here's what, after I pay off my mortgage after 30 years, what it really costs you. And I think for a public works project, that's an important consideration. All of this, also the 155 million doesn't include inflation. It doesn't include those financing costs. It probably doesn't also include the real possibility of a lot of change orders when you replace something that's 40 years old and that it has pipes that go back 60, 70 years. I've followed public works projects over the years. I've never seen one that doesn't include at least some change orders that inevitably increase the price. I would guess that
So the
for
project-
Town and Country, that's probably been your experience as well.
So the project includes a 10% contingency for
Yeah.
covering aspects like that.
Okay.
And I would say on average, our projects, we expect about 1% to 2% change order rate.
Okay.
That's pretty consistent, including projects where we renovate existing facilities. So
I see.
I think that is adequately covered within the cost of renovation.
Okay. Of greater concern when I was looking at those numbers is that the numbers presuppose that a major commercial facility, Onego Bio, will be part of this payment process and will pay a pretty significant amount to help finance, pay for this wastewater facility. But Onego Bio is in the beginning stages of a federal lawsuit over a patent with another company called the Every Company. I brought copies of 2 stories about that lawsuit to anybody who wants it, if the city would like to make copies of those stories. And according to a filing in the lawsuit on November 26th, which was a day before Thanksgiving, Onego Bio asserts that every company is, quote, disrupting its business relationships and expansion efforts in Wisconsin. That would mean the facility that they proposed for Jefferson. I don't know whether you're aware of that lawsuit or whether the city council is aware of that lawsuit. The filing also includes a timeline. That was part of the November 6th filing in the lawsuit, showing that a trial date for the lawsuit won't be set at least until June 2027. So that means that the federal judge overseeing it, once they get through with all the discovery, all those things, might then set a date for who knows when, which would seem, in those cases, that could be a significant cost issue for the city. And so I just wonder, who knows how long it's going to go on. These kinds of court cases can go on for a long time. Has anyone from the city spoken about this lawsuit with Onego Bio? You have?
We have,
Okay.
we have.
Will you, after I'm done babbling here, can you address that? What they've said, what they've told us?
Sure.
And I guess my other questions along with that would be, how confident are you that Onego Bio will build its facility here on the timeline suggested in Town and Country's presentation? I mean, I hope that they do build the facility. Everybody hopes that, right? But if they don't, who would pay that anticipated share for the wastewater treatment plant? And then really just one final question, and that question is, why now? The city has known for years that this wastewater treatment facility is way beyond the suggested lifespan. I've had city officials tell me that. So why wasn't this project started a decade ago when the cost could have been much lower? I've spoken about inflation and how that's a real concern right now, but in 2008, when the plant almost flooded, or after that time, why didn't the city address it then? Because now it's going to cost a heck of a lot more for everybody. And I just think that the public deserves an explanation of that timeline. I hope these questions and concerns will be answered before the city council approves what will eventually, by the numbers you just showed, eventually triple sewage rates for residential customers. The average user, and this, I'm basing what I'm saying right now from your presentation from back in early November of this year. But by that presentation, the average monthly user cost will go from $42.68 a month. That was the number that Town and Country showed.
We corrected that figure. That was the existing numbers were
Okay.
incorrectly calculated.
Okay. So the new numbers are the ones that you were showing. So from 30 to 90, so it'll triple it. It'll be about $60 a month. That comes out to what, about $720 a year? $720 per year for the average residential user that you're going to have to pay to build this. So I know that the facility needs to be built, but I do wonder about how that much money, $720 a year, an increase will impact already stretched families when they go to the grocery store or when they're shopping for Christmas presents for their children. I think you have to consider that as you go forward. And thank you for your time. And I do really appreciate the work that you put into that report.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Tim, you want to
Well,
address
Sure.
some of his questions?
well, to the extent I can. Our last visit with the Onago Bio folks was in October of this year. A team came over from Finland and we chatted about their project. We were told their plan is to close on the land in 2026. They are in the process of hiring a design firm right now. I don't know which one ultimately they're going to select. And design their project with a goal of breaking ground in 2027. That probably is a 2-year build-out. In terms of the lawsuit, they're bringing a relatively new product into the market. I'm certainly no expert. I really don't deal with new product entry into markets, but I know lots of times there's a lot of toes that are stepped on by competing firms, and a lot of times this ends up in court. We were told they're not particularly concerned about it, but that may or may not be the case. You're right, this needs to play out as a legal proceeding in a court of law, probably a federal court of law, I would guess. And I would say is their milestone, they got FDA regulatory approval earlier this fall, which is a milestone for them, to be able to bring their product into at least the US market. I think that process, we were told, is much more cumbersome, like in a European Union country. It may be a 3-year process. Here it's about 1 or 1.5 years. I don't know, Ben. I would generally say to the question, what happens if they don't come? You know, I think the design process for this company sort of overlaps the design process for a wastewater plant, and I suppose there's opportunity to redesign the capacity of the plant should something happen.
Right. Yeah, so to talk about that point, we've done quite a few projects where industry has a major component of it. It turns into an iterative process. So that's kind of anticipated and built into that project schedule where we've met with and will continue to meet with each of those industries. There is going to be some contractual obligations created between the city and them in terms of those capacities. So if we are going to build for them and guarantee some capacity for them, we'd be looking for a contractual commitment from them. All of that will be targeted over the next 12 months in an effort to minimize the risk for the city for all of those things. And that's been historically the practice in Jefferson. That was the case with Nestle, that was the case with Tyson's Water Heater, that will be the case with any expanded facilities.
If I can just, a quick follow-up question. Were you aware of this federal lawsuit until just now?
Personally,
Yeah.
I've heard of it, I had not known any people with it.
Okay, and was the city council informed of this lawsuit before this meeting?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Was it the news media? Earlier this fall, I don't remember when that was, but it was reported in the local news media.
So the city, all the city council members were informed?
I'm not gonna take a poll here, whether all the city council members were informed of that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I knew about it.
yeah,
Just from reading online stuff.
okay.
Yeah, I guess when I think of industry, I'm thinking of our historical industry like Nestle, and now, I mean, when we have an industry, we make agreements with those industries, and we have a history of that. We don't just bank on one industry, and we have a very good history of bringing industry to the community. And we're not going to just, if this is something that would stop this one industry, it's not going to stop the need for a wastewater plant that's over 20 years in need.
I
So
understand that.
this, I guess this is not a concern because we have Kiefelman, we have Nestle, we have Plumero. We don't concentrate on one industry.
Right, but Alderman Byer, in Appendix Q of their report, there are 3 industries mentioned. And
Yeah.
one of them is Onago Bio, and what they're expected to pay for their usage is baked into how
But
it's
it's
going to
not
be
the
paid
only
for.
one.
So you can understand, I think, why as a citizen that might be a concern to me.
Yes, I can, but it's not the only one, and I don't think you should just put your spotlight on just the one. We are a whole community of everything, of all our history and all our people. And I think we need to give an opportunity to someone else that would like to ask a question.
I'll ask for the next person that would like to offer comments or questions. Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Could you please state your name and address for the
Sorry.
record? Thank you.
Libby Scott, 1306 James Court. I guess one of the questions is when we got the letter, one of our main concerns was the park relocation. That park is one of the only green spaces in our neighborhood. It's a fairly industrial side of Jefferson, surrounded by a lot of factories. So I guess my question is, I'm going to say one more thing and then I'll ask my question. Within a year ago, I can't remember quite what month, we had attended an open house for the Parks and Rec Department of Jefferson, and we were looking at their proposed plans for the next 5 years. They had stated plans. I mean, everything, of course, is tentative because things are subject to change in 5 years. Connecting the park with the other areas and the bike trails. And I was just curious where the park is planning to be moved, because right now it's the only park that, like, when we have kids, that's the only one they can walk to without crossing Main Street, which is very busy, with stoplights that I wouldn't want my child to walk alone. So my question is, where would the park be moved to that would still serve as a green space for the residential areas where we live?
Sure. We have considered various locations. The city does own property, green space around the VFW rec center, both the small ball diamond that's out in front on the frontage there, as well as alongside there. There's a few acres of green space that's about equivalent to what the soccer fields are at Tentsfeld Park right now. We're looking at that as a primary target area so that it would keep it in the neighborhood, but still provide the recreational opportunities.
Can I ask just one more? Would it be developed like how Tentsville is now, or would it, like, for example, the VFW has that ballpark, would it stay as that ballpark?
It's yet to be determined. We respect that, there's a need for that. We also know that we can put a soccer field any place that is flat and we can grow grass. So I don't mean to, be flippant about that, but we are conscious of keeping recreational facilities in the neighborhood to serve the neighborhood. Thank you. Next person.
My name is Shannon Cullen, and I'm at 1316 James Court. One neighbor had mentioned to me that it was possible that the park was donated to the city. And I just have a question whether that, if it was donated, is it restricted? And is there any, do we know, is the question. Is it in?
So, I think the time for the restriction has expired, has it not?
It was restricted, but I think it ran out in 87 or 89. Because the neighbors that did donate it foresaw the expansion of the plant. That they did restrict it for a period of time, but that ran out in the late 80s. So it was.
That's documented somewhere that the
register of
family
deeds.
restricted?
What's that?
The family restricted it with a time sensitive?
Yes, right on the deed.
Oh, okay.
Next person. Anyone else, questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Janelle. I'm at 254 East John Street. So I guess how long will the upgrade last us compared to doing a brand new facility?
The expectation, so they're certainly reuse of existing structures, but the goal with it is to look at, we've talked about 100 years, but it's kind of the 80 to 100 year style project versus just renovating the existing facility. So it's meant to be a beyond 20, looking more at the 50 to 100 year style improvement. That doesn't mean you're not doing something 20 to 30 years from now. That's meant to address that the structures and the use of that site can go on kind of in perpetuity on that site. Electrical, mechanical, it's just like the furnace. The furnace is not going to last for 100 years. So when we look at the mechanical components of the facility, those have a design life of still 20 to 30 years. The concrete has a design life of 60 to 100 years. A pipe has a design life of 60 to 100 years. Our goal in expanding the development of the treatment plant is to create the opportunity to use the site in perpetuity.
Was that your question? I think, were you asking about construction sequence, like how long will construction take?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So then what happens when we outgrow the expansion? Then where are you guys gonna go? Are you guys just gonna keep furthering along in Tensfeld? Because you guys are right now only supposed to go to that outbuilding, if I'm correct.
No, the plan is that all of Tensfeld is developed. So it goes all the way to that southern boundary. That's what's shown on all of those figures.
Okay. So what happens when you guys outgrow that? And then you guys need to make more updates to stuff that's existing already?
So that's, and I don't have a figure that really addresses this, but in the discussions, that's where we have kind of the ability to build next to it, demo, build next to it, so that we're not going to use up all of the space to begin with, I guess is the shortest answer to that. I can't, just like nobody here can to the city of Jefferson 50, 60, 100 years from now, but the outlook at it was intended to provide opportunities to expand and replace kind of in perpetuity.
Lucas Wellness, 421 East Linden Drive. Kind of going off of her question about future expansion, kind of not having space in that space currently. I guess, was there cost estimates available to the public at all for the other alternatives that weren't recommended by you?
Those are all in the report.
They're all in the report. Okay.
Tonight, I mean, I already went over my time, but so it was meant to be a summary tonight, but yeah, all of that is publicly available. I might have forgot to say this at the beginning, but the report can be downloaded from the city's website. It is on the main page, left side. If you know where the bill pay button is, it's like 4 lines below that.
Does that include the appendices?
I didn't put it. If it doesn't, we can absolutely get appendices of it.
Just kind of in my opinion, it seems like you're kind of blocked unless you're taking over people's properties in the future to expand past that. It seems like you guys are putting a lot of work into filling in and getting it out of the floodplain when you can push it somewhere else, maybe outside of the city, because that's pretty central in the city. It would be nice to have that back as a natural area instead of a plant that's right along the river that you can see when you drive through the middle of the city. I guess that's why I was asking about the numbers, because I was like, if it doesn't cost...
It's about a $15 million difference between going to a new site. And that was a lot of the driving factors. We had a lot of discussions about that at the council.
I mean, when you're talking about that in the scope of 150 million, it seems, for a future aspect, it seems to be relatively a better option to me. I know you guys are just recommending that option, but that's my opinion.
Thank you. Next person? Anyone else have any more comments or questions? We want to make sure everybody gets a chance to express themselves. Hearing none? Thank you. Does any of the council members have any questions for Ben or Andrew?
Just a quick question regarding the Onego question. If for some reason Onego did not end up building, what would be the estimate for the cost? Would the plant be resized? Okay, so that would reduce perhaps the cost of the plant, and then also would that affect the rate cost?
Unfortunately, user rates would probably go up, right? Because
Even by
you-
rating.
economies
Even
of
if you
scale.
resized it.
Correct, because economies of scale, you're paying less per thing, right? You're paying less per unit of wastewater because you have more mouths that you're.
Do you have a rough idea of what that additional cost could be?
No, not at this time. That'll be, I think there's a lot of variables at play with those that will be discussed at the council level.
Can we talk about a future
It would be
prospect?
premature to even speculate.
Do you want to go that way?
No.
Okay.
Well, and remember, in picking this site over ones out in the country, there was the issue of the distance, having to pump the sewage out to the country in the first place, then having to pay to pump the sewage back to the sewage disposal plant. There was the issue of several of the sites, if you remember, had large mounds
Yep.
that were obstructing the way.
There's
There-
certainly not zero risk, to your point, Chad, because there's a lot of archaeological sites in
Right, the archaeological sites, we
Jefferson
can't
County.
dig
It's
there.
kind of if you shoot a shotgun at a map of Jefferson County, you're gonna run into an archaeological site, and all of those play into the siting and treatment plan. So there's not as many as you would think options available within a practical distance.
And then there's always the issue too of, that would be a purchase of land. Instead, this is land the city already owns. So there would be a significant cost in purchasing the land. That is providing the farmer wants to sell the land. And if the farmer doesn't want to sell the land, and we're hell bent on that's where it's going to be, then you have to potentially look at an eminent domain situation, which we do not want to do. I do not, in some of the sites that were proposed, I'm like, oh God, you can't do that. There's no way. Then there's the timeline of an eminent domain going through the courts, and it drags out for years. And it just didn't work.
With regard to the uncertainty about the Onego company, I think we can say with a fair amount of certainty that it is more likely that there will be 1, 2, or more other new businesses added to this that have not been taken into account for here at this point, because they're not at that point, but that are still considering Jefferson as a destination.
Who are they?
That's confidential, sir.
There's non-disclosure agreements that we've signed.
Yeah, they're non-disclosure agreements. So, are there any other questions or comments? If not, we'll ask for a motion to, yes? I'll ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor signify by saying aye as your name is called, please.
Alderman Overberger.
Aye.
Schrader.
Aye.
Stallman.
Aye.
Mackey.
Aye.
Teeter.
Aye.
Tully.
Aye.
Fire.
Aye.
Niles.
Okay, the public hearing is closed. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor signify by saying aye as your name is called. Sorry, could have done a voice vote.
Schrader.
Aye.
Stallman.
Aye.
Mackey.
Aye.
Teeter. Tully. Fire. Niles. Overberger.
Okay, thank you. We will be moving to our committee meetings in the adjacent rooms and then convening the regular council meeting at 7 p.m. Thank you for coming.